still need a worksheet. Did you get one, Raphael?
Yeah.
You guys all have one? Okay, so you can start if you haven't. Okay. All right, so the first thing you guys are going to need is an armature. Oh, let me tell you about your requirements for this assignment as we're getting ready to do this armature. First of all, it is an animal sculpture, so you're going to be making a sculpture of an animal. What I mean by animal is that it has to be a real animal. It can't be like a Pokemon or a cartoon. It can't be an insect. That's different, right? It has to be an animal. So, and I don't want you to go and make something human either, right? So you're making an animal sculpture, step one. That's the first requirement. Second requirement is I want it about 8 to 10 inches in any one direction, no bigger. If you make it bigger than that size, it may not fit in the kiln and it may not get fired this year. As an estimate, this is a pretty good size. No bigger. And I'm going to give you some tips on how to avoid making it too big. Third thing is that you must work from a picture. It needs to be a printed picture, not a picture from your Chromebook screen, too. So, some of you guys have access to printers at home, or you have a study hall and you can go print from the media center, that's fine. If you do not have access to a printer or it's very difficult for you, you can post them to your Ceramics 1 folder and let me know and I can print it for you. However, I plan to do my printing on Wednesday, 3rd period, so you need to have it up there by then or you need to have it printed out by Wednesday. The downside to not doing your homework is not the points for this one because it's really not worth much of anything, point value-wise, to have the picture. The real downside is that at some point you're going to ask me for my help. If you do not have a printed out picture in front of you of whatever animal you want to make, I'm not going to help you. I'll just pass you by. And that's not because I'm a mean teacher, lady. It's because if you don't have a picture, I'm not going to know what the heck it looks like. You guys will see when I do my animal sculpture today, whatever this animal creation I come up with is going to look like a bear, pig, dog thing, right? It's because I'm not going to work from a picture. I'm just going to show you some basic sculpting techniques. If you don't want your thing to look like a bear, pig thing, you are going to want to work from a picture. So let's talk about the kind of pictures you want. Number one, you want to have a photograph, not a cartoon. This does not give you the details that you need. If you want to have some cartoon mixed in there, you can, but I need the actual photograph because you want your animal to look like the photograph. The other thing I recommend, although don't require, is that you have as many pictures as you can because you're going to be making something three-dimensionally. You may want to get a close-up detail of the eyes, the nose, the ears. You may want to have a picture of what that animal looks like from the back if it's sitting down, like which way do his legs go. You may want to have a picture of that animal, here's my little pigtail detail, right? So you may want to have a profile view, a view of the animal from the side. You may want to have the front view, the back view, all of those things because you're working from something that's two-dimensional and trying to turn it into something three-dimensional. So you guys are going to find that the more pictures that you can collage together of details, the easier your life is going to be when trying to make this, okay? So, when are your pictures due? Wednesday, by 3rd period if you're posting them on your folder. Okay, next requirement, 4th requirement is that it needs to have realistic fur, skin, or scales, which means no cartoons or things like that. I'm going to show you a couple different techniques for making fur, skin, and scales today. And then this last requirement sounds funny, but just write it down now and I'll explain it in a second. The last requirement is that I don't want your animal standing on 4 or 2 legs. Not standing on 4 or 2 legs. Okay, so just to reiterate the requirements. Number 1, it has to be an animal. Number 2, it has to be about 8 to 10 inches in one direction. Number 3, you have to be working from a picture, not your Chromebook screen, just a printed out picture. I don't care if it's color or black and white, doesn't matter, but a printed picture. Number 4, it has to have realistic fur, skin, or scales, and last but not least, it should not be standing on 4 or 2 legs. No, I don't think I want it standing on. Well, I don't know. It depends. So Anthony asked standing on 1 leg, and it depends what the animal is. So here's why not 4 or 2 legs. Because if you're sculpting something, and if you look at my samples here, do I have animals that have 4 and 2 legs? Yes. but they're not standing on the 4 or 2 legs. So technically, this is kind of standing on one leg because it's just standing on one base. If you look at something like the cat down there, it's standing on 3 legs because it's got the base and then it's got the front paws supporting it. So the animal can have 4, 2, or 1 leg, but the reason that I don't want you to have it built that way is for strength. If you try to make the dog standing up on the 4 legs and you're trying to keep it soft, it sags down and they end up getting really, really squat. It's a little bit of a challenge. So you want to have your dog, if you're going to sculpt a dog, either sitting down or laying down. Okay? Does that make sense? So if it's on 1 leg, we can talk about it. It's a possibility depending on how big that leg is, right? If you think about trying to sculpt a bird, for example, it's got these 2 spindly little legs and then this big heavy body. How are you going to make that work with clay? Now, it's not that you can't make a bird, but if you're going to make a bird, you're probably going to want to do something like having that bird sit in the nest, and you could sculpt the nest. Or having the bird sit on a tree branch, and you could sculpt the tree branch. So you can incorporate part of the environment into your sculpture if you want to, but that's how you can tackle those issues. Okay? All right. So, second step of the problem is to brainstorm possible solutions. So some of you guys are probably already, as Anthony asked, a question, some of you guys may already be thinking, okay, I'm going to sculpt my dog Fluffy. Okay, maybe I want to sculpt this or a turtle or whatever, right? So as you think of ideas, I just want you to write them all down in that blank right there, okay? Rather than shouting them out and asking, can I do this? We can talk about that later. After you see this demonstration, you can go back through that list and you can eliminate and say, okay, this one is the one that I think is going to work the best. Okay, so filling in the blanks section. The first thing you guys need to make is an armature. Okay? An armature is an internal support structure, kind of like a skeleton. So in the end, all of these animals are going to end up being hollow. They look solid, but as you can see, they are hollowed all the way out. And the reason is if they weren't hollowed out, they would explode in the firing. So everything in this animal is 1 inch thick or thinner. Nothing thicker than 1 inch in the end. We're going to start by building them somewhat solid, and then we hollow it out when that part's over. So
what about the hands?
These are about 1 inch thick, so they can be solid. It depends how thick they become. The legs were a little thick, so they got hollowed out. So, a couple important things about sculpting an armature, or making an armature. First thing is you're going to use newspaper for the armature, and then the newspaper I keep in the top right compartment of that shelf. It's a little low now, I just have to refill it. I have more in the back, but that's where it is. You don't need a lot. The biggest mistake that students make, the ones that the students end up with the mamba jama animals that don't get fired, is they make their armature too big. You have to keep in mind that whatever this armature is going to fit inside the compartment here, so it doesn't have to be much newspaper at all. What students tend to do is they make their armature the size that they want the finished piece, and then the piece ends up 4 times bigger than that, and before you know it, it's huge, right? So I would say you probably only need 3 sheets of newspaper to get a decent armature. The next key to success for making a good armature is to make sure that you squeeze the paper really, really tight. You want that to be as compressed as possible, and then I take a flat sheet of newspaper like this. I would say it's like making a burrito, and I'm wrapping it up in this shell. Now, if you wrap it really, really tight, this piece of paper, this final piece of paper, could you rip off a little piece of that tape for me, Alvaro? This last little piece of paper holds it all together. All I should need is 1 little piece of masking tape to hold this thing together. You do not want to, thank you. You do not want to mummify, like wrap and wrap and wrap tape all around this, because in the end it becomes really hard to get the armature out, and you guys will see that when I get this armature out of here, okay? So that's a good armature right there, really tight. Here's a not so good armature. And this is another thing that I see students do wrong. They say, okay, there's my piece of here's my tortilla shell for my burrito. And here's my piece of newspaper for the inside. Do. And they make it really, really loose. Why would that be a bad armature?
Too big?
The weak spots.
It's weak, yeah. There's no strength to it. So if I go to put some heavy clay on there, it just collapses. If I go to put heavy clay on this armature, it's going to support it. Okay? So you need to get it as tight as you can physically squeeze it in order to support the weight of the clay. Okay, so.
You got the physics right. It's funny.
I meant to do that. So, okay, so here we go. The next part is something called gesture work, okay? So if you guys have taken a drawing class with me, we've done something called gesture drawing. This is going to be gestural as well. It's just sculpture. This is what a gesture drawing looks like. Can you guys tell what's going on here with these people? Mm-hmm. You can tell a pose, right? But you can't see, are there any eyes, nose, hair, details? How long does it look like it took this person to draw this picture?
5 minutes.
5 minutes or so, right? Quick. So the first stage of this whole thing is to do a gesture sculpture. It is going to be challenging for some of you because I know a lot of you guys are perfectionists and you want it to be just right. But the first day that you make this animal, it could be a pig, it could be a dog, it could be a bear, it could go any which way because it's just going to be the basic gesture of the animal. Alright, so I'm going to squeeze out some coils here, and I want you to notice that I call them coils, but they're not really because I'm not going to roll them on the canvas and make them all pretty and perfect. They're going to be loose and quick, and I just want them to be able to cover my armature. So, what do you guys want me to sculpt today? What animal?
Monkey.
A monkey? Okay, we'll do a monkey. Now, I say that it'll be a monkey, but you will quickly see that, number one, I'm not working from a picture of a monkey, so it probably won't really look like a monkey. And then I'm going to show you fur, skin, scales, and all kinds of weird things, so it's going to look like a monkey who just swam through like a nuclear power plant water or something. It's going to get weird. But we'll start off with the monkey gesture, okay? Alright, so I'm squeezing out a bunch of these coils. They're probably about 1 inch to 1.5 inches thick, and they're really loose. All I'm going to do is cover this newspaper completely with clay. This is day 1. The first day of your sculpture, you have got to have the entire armature covered with clay. And not only that, but you want it to have all of its arms, legs, head, neck, and stuff attached on the first day. It doesn't have to look good yet, but you have to get it on there. You have to get it covered. So there's my monkey body. Okay, and I'm going to loot it. And now most of the projects I have you guys keep it, like you make something and then you let it dry to leather hard before you attach it. This project is different. I want you to keep it plastic the entire time you're working. So I want you to spray it and wrap it in paper every day to keep it soft.
Can we make a fish? Or does it have to have arms and legs?
No, it doesn't have to. It can be a fish.
Okay.
Reptiles are okay. Did you write it down in your blank?
Reptiles are okay? Or?
Reptiles are fine. The other thing is I say no cartoons, but I've had people ask me, can I make a dragon or something like that? And some mythical creatures end up being okay because there's enough detail. So this is a dragon. There's enough detail in a dragon. No, I think it's a dragon. A Pokemon is just a round, smooth ball. There's just with no muscle tone or anything, so there's not enough
Some of them.
information, right? So mythical creatures, usually I allow. You can run them by me as an idea. Okay, so there's my monkey body. Now I'm going to give my monkey some legs. And usually, I want you guys to remember that sculpture is both additive and reductive. So sometimes you add clay on, sometimes you take clay off. So I'm going to make some hip bones because I'm going to have my monkey sitting. And then I'm just going to sculpt on some legs here. And I want you to notice how quickly I'm adding clay and how not careful I'm being. I'm really trying to do that gesture. You need to get all this entire part done in one class period. If you let it sit overnight and then you try to continue with this on the next day, it's going to be really difficult and challenging to make it stick, because the clay is the most plastic on the first day. The reason is even if you cover it properly, there's an armature inside of this which is sucking moisture out. So even if you spray it and wrap it really well, it's still going to dry out on you a little bit. And I don't have a picture. I don't know how monkeys. Let's say it like that. Ish. I can make it cross its leg or bend its leg or something later. All right, so now looks like I attached those legs pretty well, right? They're not attached very well, and here's why. The one thing you need to remember is to flip your animal upside down and loot the bottom too. So you guys see all those seams that are left in there from when I attached? That's just going to break off really, really easily. So before I'm done, I'm going to flip my animal always upside down, and I'm going to loot the bottom as well. So it's got to be 360 looted all the way around. All right, there we go. Now, still day one, I need some monkey arms. So here we go. I'm going to loot. I'm basically kind of starting with his shoulders. And then I can add on. Now, people always say, and the reason that this sculpture is like one of the last projects I do and it's the hardest is because all of you guys are going to pick different things. Maybe one person's going to do a fish and one person's going to do a monkey. So I can't say first you do this, then you do this, then you do this. It requires a lot of your own thinking. So I can tell you the basics about sculpture, but there's a lot of ingenuity or coming up with things on your own with this project. But one of the common questions I get is, well, look at his legs stick straight out and I want him to cross his legs, or let me stick his head on before I do this. I'm going to add a little clay for where I think his neck should go.
Is the head hollow too?
It will be hollow in the end. I like to build them solid and then hollow them out later. If you want to build a separate armature for the head, you can. The other thing is, as I'm adding clay, I don't know if you've noticed, I'm constantly rolling it into a ball and then attaching it. Maybe not a perfect ball, but I don't want to take flat pieces or slabs and attach them, because as you guys know from previous projects, if you add flat to flat, it can blow off. So every time I attach a piece of clay, I kind of roll it in my hand a little bit, and then I attach it by luting it out. Okay, so now, day one, I got all my pieces on there. But now my students will say to me, okay, well, he looks really stiff and rigid, and I want his arms to bend, and I want his head to turn. I want him to look a little more gestural at this point. How can I turn his head? You ready? If it's plastic, you can manipulate it. Even if he rips a hole in his neck, you can just lute it back together. If it's leather hard, you can't do that. So if I want his arms to bend, I want to bend his leg. Now I've created a gesture or a pose to an animal. Now, could this monkey end up being a bear or a dog, or, well, maybe not a dog with those legs, but you know, like a lemur, something else very easily. It doesn't have the specific details yet. Day one. Okay, that took me what? 10?
18 minutes.
18 minutes?
That's what it said. Well, that's when you started.
Okay, 18 minutes. It took me 18 minutes. So you guys get double that time, one period to make a gesture. Now comes the details, okay? So let's go back. Did I finish everything on the first side of the sheet for you guys?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Let's flip it over. All right, so then I even finished the first one. It says you're going to start the body of the animal by wrapping thick coils not rolled coils, really thick, loose coils around the armature, and this sculpture must stay plastic in the entire stage that you're working on it until you're going to hollow it out, which is like the last 3 days of the project. So pretty much the entire time it stays plastic. All right, so let's talk about now as we start to refine, there's a couple little tips I can give you on how to do.
This looks like a horse.
Yeah, I know, a lot of people say that. The only reason I think, and it's actually a sculpture from before I even started teaching here. It's been around for a while. The only reason I think it's a dragon is because it looks like scales instead of fur. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys a couple of detail things that you can do. So we're going to do some fur and some scales, and I'm going to show you a little bit with eyes and things like that. Also, the more you keep your animal kind of compressed, the less likely it's going to be to break. So the more attached things are to themselves, the stronger it is. So you don't really want to sculpt it with the arms out if you can avoid it. I don't know what kind of monkey this is. I'm thinking baboon. Okay, so let's talk about fur, skin, and scales first. 2 basic ways, let me flip them around because we'll do some back here, to create fur, skin, and scales. The 2 basic ways are either stamping or sculpting. Stamping is quicker. Sculpting takes a lot more time. But some students like the way it looks, so I'm going to show you how to do both. Now, we're going to, I'm refining this a little, smoothing it out a little bit to prepare for the surface of the fur.
Is this still the first thing?
No. This is moving on. The refining stuff, you get 3 weeks for the project. I want the gesture on the first day, and you get 2 weeks to refine, basically. So that's why my monkey is not going to look like a monkey, is because it takes that long to actually make it look like something. But you definitely want to have all the arms, the legs, the head, the body attached day 1. All right, so now I've kind of smoothed out his backside so I can start doing some fur, skin, and scales. First thing I'm going to do is stamping technique. Now, you can use a pin tool, you can use a wood tool. It's kind of like incising, except incising means you're drawing on the surface like this. Stamping means you're pressing in. So even though I'm using my pin tool, I still consider it stamping if I make this kind of fur, because I'm really going to use my pin tool to actually, the side of the pin tool to press in, right? The other thing that a picture is really, really helpful for in making your animal look good is that animal fur changes direction as it moves around the animal. If you make all your animal fur just go straight down, it's going to look like Chewbacca no matter what you make, right? It's going to look weird. So if you look at the details of a finished one, you can see the way the fur changes direction as it moves around the face. It changes direction as it hits the arms and all that kind of stuff. So you need to not only, pay attention to technique, but you need to pay attention to the direction of the fur as you move around the body. Okay? All right, so that would be stamping with a pin tool. Stamping with a wood tool. Let's say you have a furrier animal like a koala bear or like a panda and you want it to look really, really fuzzy. You could change your tool and you could use a wood tool. You can even add clay on and then texturize it. Okay? So that would be like a thicker fur. If you have like a reptile, a fish, and you want scales or something like that, again, you can do stamping, and it can be anything you can press into the clay. There's a seashell if I want to make this look like scales. I could use, a lot of people for reptiles use the end of their pin tool just to use like that, get it like a circular pattern going, kind of reptilian. So you kind of have to play with it, with your stamps, and see what marks you like. Now, Sculpting, a little bit more challenging. Some students like the way it looks. This monkey over here is sculpted. The thing about that monkey is that's made with a garlic press, which is where you put the clay in and you squirt it out like the Play-Doh Fun Factory, and it squirts out like that. And somebody broke our garlic press, so we don't have one right now. Hopefully we'll get one back, but for right now, if you're going to sculpt your fur, you have to do it individually by piece. So if I'm going to sculpt, I'm going to smooth out my stamping and do a redo here. If I want to sculpt, and I'll do some scales, right, to start. The biggest tip with sculpting on fur or scales is that you have to start at the back of the animal and you have to work your way forward. And the reason for that is this. So watch me as I do a few scales. This is a lot more time consuming. I'm not going to spend a lot of time making these look real pretty. But I would add a ball of clay and then lute it in. Then I can do another one right next to it. I can do a whole row of scales like this. Now, here we go. Here's the reason why you want to start at the back, and I would have even started lower if this was the real deal. I want to start at the back and work my way forward is because the next row that I do is going to layer on top of that first row and cover that luting. So as I add this one and I lute this one in, and this actually is a good technique if you want to do feathers too for like a bird, and then you can just add feather texture to them later. Yes? Okay. Okay, so as I keep building, now if I had to add one underneath, there'd be no room for me to lute it, so that's why you don't want to just start any old place. You want to start at the back or the bottom of the animal and work your way up. Okay, next let's do eyes, or eye sockets, okay? So, or I should say, the first thing that you do when you make eyes is do the eye socket. Now, a monkey is a little more human, so their eyes tend to go towards the front, but a lot of animals have their eyes on the side. But I think a monkey is more like here. So I'm going to start by making eye sockets. When you start with sculpture, or when you're thinking about sculpture, it's not just what you're putting on the surface. That's why I made hip bones when I attached these legs, is so I got that muscle tone. I want it to look like, I want to think about what the skeleton looks like, what the muscle tone looks like, and all that stuff. So when I start with an eye, I start with an eye socket always. If I just put the eye directly on the face, it ends up looking bug-eyed, and it looks strange, it's sticking out weird. So after I make the eye socket, I put an eyeball in the eye socket. So I'll do one on each side so you guys can see. I think that one's bigger than the other one, but that's okay. It's okay for now. And then I'm going to put the eyelids on. So when I make the eyelid, I take a little piece of clay and I roll a mini coil in my hand. Now because there's like a depression in my hand there, I usually get like a tapered coil, which means it's skinnier on the sides and fatter in the middle. I can just karate chop that and I get like an eyelid shape. Then I just lay the eyelid over the top. And then I make a really skinny little coil to be the bottom lid. And lay it on there like this. Okay? Now I'm going to lute it all in, but that's not where you're done with the eye, because if you just quit there, your animal can look a little thin and a little emaciated, like the eyes end up looking a little sunken. You have to then build the flesh on top of it, and really, really important in the eye structure is the brow bone, because most of the time when you think an animal has an emotion, like when you come home and your dog Fluffy comes running to you at the door and is so excited to see you, most of that dog's emotions don't come from the fact that the dog can smile, right? It comes from the eyebrows and the brow bone. So if I want to all of a sudden, like let's say I'm sculpting like super angry gorilla in the rainforest and I just walked in on its territory. Angry monkey. Let's say you don't want an angry monkey. You're like a little happy, cute monkey. Oh, I'm a happy, cute monkey. I don't know. I can't see what I'm doing.
Looks creepy.
Looks creepy. But I can do a lot in terms of emotion with just my eyebrows. It's not the fact that I'm smiling or baring my teeth. That can be part of it, but a lot of it goes in with that brow bone. So this is a really important feature of the eye and what the animal looks like, emotion, and how it emotes, is what they say. All right, so I didn't fill in my emaciated. I'm going to fill this in a little bit before I add my brow bone, because this is the part that ends up looking a little strange. So I'm going to fill that in with a little bit of clay. And then I'm going to go, angry monkey. And I'll play with the brow bone. Okay? So those are the steps of the eye. You want to start with the eye socket, build in the eyeball, add the eyelids, fill in the fleshy part so that it doesn't look thin and emaciated, and then play with emotion or brow bone. Angry monkey. Sound effects always help. You guys know that. Okay? So there's some basics with eyes. Let's talk about how to sculpt on details. Now I know my monkey doesn't have ears necessarily that are going to stick out, but let's say it's like a dog or a bunny, right? And you want to put ears on. A good way to do it and a bad way to do it. The way students most of the time want to do it is they want to sculpt the ear and then attach. Well, let's make it this kind of a monkey ear. Alright. So students will be like, alright, I'm going to make a monkey. Right? So that's what most students do. Bad thing is it's got square edges so it doesn't look realistic, and it's very weakly attached. And it still looks thick. So what you want to do instead is you actually want to add the clay on first. And make sure it's luted all the way around. And then what you want to do is you want to sculpt that ear off of the form, and you can pinch the edges really, really thin, and it'll still be very strongly attached at the base. Okay? Okay, so see the difference? So I want you guys to sculpt off the form, not sculpt and then add to the form. Make sense? Okay, cool. What's next? We did eyes. We did sculpting, we did fur, skin, and scales. Okay, let's talk about hollowing it out.
What about the mouth?
Well, the mouth you can do two different ways. You can either cut it, and the thing is again, sculpture is additive and reductive. So depending on your picture, I could either like cut the mouth into here and just create it from the snout that I already started, or I could sculpt a piece of clay and add it on, depending upon which. So a lot of students just, when they think about sculpture, they just add and add and add. But it's not always adding that you want to do. Sometimes it is just taking away from something. I don't know if that looks like a monkey mouth or not.
Not really.
Sorry. There. Angry monkey. Ah! Okay. All right, so let's talk about hollowing it out. Oh, the one thing I didn't do for my demonstration, but I want to show you guys, is that when you're sculpting, hopefully you're not going to be sculpting upside down and backwards like this, because it's not conducive to making something good. It will be helpful for you to put it up on one of these banding wheels, so that when you're sitting down, you're actually at eye level with the animal, and you can see what you're doing a lot better. Now, if the animal is too big for the head of the wheel, I just put the animal on a bat, and then I put the bat right on that wheel, and then, ooh, that is a scary, that looks like the monkey from the Wizard of Oz, kind of like flying monkey thing. Ooh, scary. It's like a troll monkey. But then I can see it a lot better if I'm like this. Okay, the next thing is when you're going to hollow it out, it should be leather hard. My recommendation is that you guys wait, or that you guys let it get leather hard, and you give yourself 3 days to hollow it out. That will give you sufficient time. If you're pushing it on the last day and hollowing it out, it's going to be a real challenge. It's going to get crazy. When I have the animal, even though it's leather hard, and I want to hollow it out and I want to see the underside, I put it on a piece of foam so I don't flatten his head. And so he stays in good shape. And then I just cut a hole where I'm gonna remove the newspaper. Okay, so I'll mark out with a pin tool hole, like that. And then that'll be the part that I get out. So I'll remove that piece of clay, and then this is the part where, and yours is gonna be leather hard, so it's gonna take a little bit longer. If you do this when it's plastic, your animal can kind of collapse and look kind of sunken. So what I'm doing now is one of those do as I say and not as I do kind of thing. So I got the newspaper where I can see it. Now I'm gonna break through that original shell of paper that I put on there, and I'm gonna try to keep my paper separate. If the paper ends up in the recycle bin, it's not the end of the world, but it decomposes and it smells like rotten eggs. So I would rather, if you get clay and paper all mixed together, just throw it in the garbage, not in the recycle. But once I break through that exterior shell, then I can pull my little balls of newspaper out from the bottom. Like that. Okay? Now, if it is a perfect inch, you don't have any work to do. But lots of times, since you're adding on, there's going to be areas that are thicker. So you will have to use your loop tool to scoop it out. So as you guys could see with my panda here, I use a loop tool even to kind of carve in the legs there. Last but not least is you must decapitate your animal. All right? We're going to chop his head off. All of these animals have had their heads chopped off, and they all survived just fine. So after you hollow them all out and you get up there as far as you can with your loop tool, you have to get work from the top down. So you're going to take your wire tool, and on the day before, 2 days before the end, what did I say, the 25th is the last day? So on the 23rd, I'm going to be coming around with my wire tool, and ready or not, I'm going to slice their heads off. Okay? It'll be okay. They will survive. I'm going to scoop out this center part here until it's an inch thick or thinner. I am going to, and be careful when you set your head down, because if you lose it, then you'll be very sad. And then I'm going to scoop here. I can scoop into the nose, I can scoop down into the neck, into the shoulders a little bit if I need to, all from this hole. And then I am going to, I left a 1/4 of an inch edge so that I could score and slip. And because it's leather hard, I can score, slip, and scoochy and put it back together. Now I will have to fix the fur and stuff around this seam to hide it. You don't want to see that. I kind of did a no-no here because I sliced through his eye, and you don't want to do that. You want to try to choose a spot that you're not going through any of the detail.